and the Blind Forest was my favorite game of 2015, and at the time I praised it for elevating the Metroidvania genre and wrapping it all up in a visually stunning package. Ori felt so fluid and satisfying to move around, and it had some pretty unique mechanics like the bash ability and being able to set your own checkpoints at will. But now, after waiting almost 3 years since its announcement, the sequel has finally arrived. And even though expectations were sky high, it still managed to deliver on the hype. Not only is it a breathtaking experience that you totally need to play, but it improved upon the original in almost every aspect. Let's talk about Ori and the Will of Wisps. Much like the first game, you get punched right in the feels from the get-go. Happy family torn apart and you gotta search the world to be reunited. But it only took about an hour of playtime to realize there's so much more to do this time around on your way to complete that quest. There's significantly more areas to explore, and even additional side quests to take on at your leisure. These range from investigating bonus dungeons to delivering messages to a lost family member. There's even one where you swap items back and forth, kind of like that long exchange quest in Link's Awakening. But I think the coolest one occurs when you discover the Wellspring Glades. This guy Grom is trying to spruce up a serene meadow as a safe haven for those that have lost their homes. And as you progress in the story and gather the game's mini collectibles, you can help in the construction of new huts, decorations, and all sorts of other improvements. It's really cool to watch it come alive over the course of your adventure, and to see all the different side stories of the villagers through to their conclusions. It essentially becomes the main hub where you can buy new upgrades or badges, and I think it's a perfect inclusion. Each location is much more varied than the previous entry. You'll go from a colorful undersea grotto, to a dangerous windy desert, to a dark thorny cavern where you need to jump from one light source to the next quickly lest you meet your demise. The detail here is so insane. I love the moth wings and creepy insects in the background. The characters you'll encounter are also more grandiose than ever before, and that includes both the good and bad guys. Probably the best new addition here is fully fledged boss fights. You see, in the Blind Forest, they went with these intense chase sequences over traditional battles. And while those also make a return and they're just as captivating and challenging as ever, they also went all out in delivering a surprisingly large array of equally engaging boss fights. There's a ton of them, and each one is drastically different from the last. Without spoiling too much, just know they're probably my favorite highlight of the game. Actually, there's a much larger focus on combat in general this time around, with a ton of special attacks that use up energy but deal massive damage, like a giant hammer to pulverize into the ground, or lightning fast spears of death. Rather than mapping all of these to their own button, however, now you have 3 slots for your X, Y, and B buttons that you can assign to the moves you prefer. While this can take some time to get used to, it makes sense given the much larger selection of options at your disposal. But of course, where Ori always shined brightest was in its game feel and Metroidvania elements, and Will of Wisps is no exception. I loved how the original offered an unprecedented level of freedom with its movement, but now it somehow continued to raise the bar even further. The signature bash maneuver makes a return, but there's a swarm of new abilities as well, like a grapple hook that clings to nearby plants, or a fireball that lights torches and melts snow. An incredible side effect of the latter is that you can also throw these fireballs into the air and bash off of them, meaning you can essentially create your own height out of thin air, instead of being at the will of some enemy spitting rocks at you or whatever. They kept the speedy dash from the definitive edition, which means you can get around the map even quicker, and you can also fast travel to a warp shrine from any point on the map. So backtracking went from a relative slog to actually being really enjoyable, just to hop around and discover hidden secrets. Most often you'll find health or energy upgrades, but occasionally you'll stumble upon a battle shrine to gain another badge slot, or trigger a time attack race against a ghost version of Ori, which is an incredible way to put your platforming skills to the test. Like I said, so much more to do this time around, I love it. They did remove the creating your own save points thing though, which at first I was sad about, but the more I thought about it, it's not like that really added anything to the genre. It was more just a fascinating gimmick. And since they autosave for you quite often now, I won't forget to save myself and lose a ton of progress. I think it was the right way to go. Instead, they focused on making the floaty parkour and level design some of the best I've ever seen. It uses the layouts to teach you how to effectively move around, but even cooler is how it slowly removes the reins and lets you roam free near the end. You'll go from narrow corridors that limit your options to full-on empty spaces that you now have the ability to traverse with ease. Instead of guiding you step by step, they just say, hey, have at it. You get over that gap yourself. The last section truly feels like a heart-pumping final exam and is quite rewarding to complete. Moon Studios really shows off their game design chops here. You see, I came for the beautiful visuals and memorable score, but I didn't expect to also find an addicting overworld that I wanted to explore to the fullest, clever platforming puzzles that make you feel like a boss to solve, and a truly heartfelt story that could melt even the coldest of hearts like my own. It's undoubtedly the whole package and easily tops my Game of the Year list so far. So do yourself a favor and give it a try. I don't think you necessarily need to play Blind Forest first, but I do recommend it simply because they're both that good. And it may feel like a regression to go back and play the original afterward. But either way, you definitely need to play Ori and the Will of Wisps, especially because it's on Game Pass, which means you can play it for $1 if you don't already use that service. I mean, you have no excuse here. How could you say no to that face? I mean, come on, you monster. I'll see you guys next time. Stay frosty, my friends. Hey, thanks so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed. If you want to help support the channel and get a ton of Frosty rewards in the process, such as monthly updates on future projects, and newsletters of underrated games that didn't make it onto the channel, you can chip in at patreon.com/snowmangaming.